I'm super excited to be partnering with you to talk about the manuscript that we recently published together in the journal Research Involvement and Engagement. The manuscript's titled Patient Engagement and Clinical Trial Design for Rare Neuromuscular Disorders, Impact on the Deliver and Achieve Clinical Trials, where you're the first author, and Molly White and I, who are with Dyne, are also authors. So what did you think when we first approached you with this idea to highlight this type of work that Dyne has done, and hopefully set some example or a bar for the industry? I'm just curious, like what crossed your mind when we came to you?
When a family receives a diagnosis of a rare disease, you become by default advocates just because you have to inform your family, your community, your school, everyone who touches your life about that disease. So when you came to me and said, we want to do this manuscript because we want to really understand that patient voice, we're going to explore it with the patient community and really try to understand how we, Dyne, as a company, can make things better in terms of our responsibilities and your burden, and how can we work together to figure out to meet our needs, but also to understand what you're going through in order to make a decision to participate in a given trial. So I see you taking all of that and creating an available model, something that people can sink their teeth in and go, oh, that's how it works.
We see this community as experts, as opinion leaders as well. And I think that is a big, that is a very important aspect to call out here, that these advocacy leaders, such as Pat, the patients and caregivers, are experts in their own right.
And I think I don't want to forget about this either. It's about hope, Ash, because when you have a diagnosis of a rare disease, hope is hard to find, and people categorize your hope as false hope or unrealistic hope. Hope is hope. We all have it, and we all think about what that means, that definition. And I think having this interaction, this bi-directional interaction with industry, I think that brings hope.
Yeah, that's a great point. We talk about that a lot with you within Dyne. Ultimately, all our goals are the same, right? Whether it's the community, industry, regulators, and payers, everyone wants meaningful therapies that patients have access to, that they can afford, that will actually change the trajectory of the disease.
I think, Ash, what you've really done, both on the clinical community side as well as at the patient side, is create a sacred space. There aren't very many opportunities for parents, family members, people with a diagnosis to be in a room and be able to speak freely, not personally, just freely, of an experience, of a priority, of a feeling that they have, in a sacred space where it's not going any further, where it won't be held against them.
And maybe I'll just take a second to talk about myotonic dystrophy just very briefly. It's the most common form of muscular dystrophy among adults. It also limits function greatly and leads to high morbidity and early mortality. And so similarly, affected individuals and their care partners for both DMD and myotonic dystrophy experience a tremendous amount of impaired quality of life. Whether it's diarrhea or constipation, but being tied and needing to be close to a bathroom, fatigue, extreme fatigue, excessive daytime sleepiness, and just not being able to get up and get going in the day until later on in the day. So these are all aspects that we need to think about when we're constructing our clinical trials beyond sit to stand or 10-meter walk test or time function test. There's a lot more that impacts these families beyond these types of measures that we need to be taking into account. And we're learning from the community how impactful these outcomes are, and we need to be able to address them in our clinical trials. So there's a lot of work to do ahead of us, both in Duchenne and myotonic dystrophy, and there's just less known.
So I think, again, it's another example of you working with a community to say what's important to you and why is it important, and what's important to you when you consider participating in a trial. What would you need to do and have available to you?
Thank you. That's really helpful. I also hope one of the things that comes out of this is that this is a mechanism not only to do the kind of work in terms of building better clinical trials that have as little burden as possible, but just in general builds trust.
I think you're right, Ash. I think it is about building trust, but it's also about building community. It's also about building educational
Yeah.
understanding of the regulatory process of the challenges that you face. I think sometimes you get a rare disease diagnosis and you feel like all the challenges are yours without and I recall when my boys were diagnosed, I thought, how hard is it to get to therapies? And now I've learned that it's pretty hard. And there's lots of responsibilities and roles and requirements that each of us have in order to come together.
I'm curious to hear from you. What do you think the next level is? Where do we take it from here? Where would you like Dyne to take it from here? We certainly have our own thoughts, but we know that there's still a long ways to go for these communities and other communities. From your perspective and your, what advice would you have in terms of having sponsors elevate even further from this kind of practice?
I want this to be the norm of how companies interact. I want this to be lessons learned for small companies about how they should interact and big companies how they should interact. So I'd like this to be lessons learned.
I'm confident that we can continue to make sure that we have these mechanisms in place to understand what's important, especially in areas maybe where less is known, like myotonic dystrophy type 1 or FSHD, and then be able to build that into the work that we do, whether it's in our early clinical trials, late stage clinical trials, real world evidence data generation. But there are numerous opportunities for us to be able to work with all of these stakeholders to develop that body of evidence that really is going to show what treatment interventions can do for the various stakeholders.